In September 2022, Burkina Faso had its second takeover by the army in less than 9 months. Then, 34-year-old Army Captain Ibrahim Traoré took power. He kicked out Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, who had taken over in January of that year, getting rid of former President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore. To explain why he removed Damiba, Ibrahim Traoré said on TV that Damiba had failed to deal with the ongoing problem of rebel fighting that has troubled Burkina Faso lately. When Ibrahim Traoré became the leader of the people who took over, some people saw that he looked like Thomas Sankara. Besides wearing a red hat, Ibrahim Traoré had several things in common with the national hero. Both were captains, both took power at age 34, and both led takeovers against military leaders who had themselves taken power by force just 8 months earlier. In this episode of African Biographics, we talk about the fast rise of Burkina Faso's Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Ibrahim Traoré was born in 1988 in Bondakwi, in the Mohoun area of Burkina Faso. He went to elementary school in his hometown and high school in Bobo-Dioulasso, Burkina Faso's second biggest city. Unlike Damiba and many other Burkina Faso officers who joined the military as teenagers, Ibrahim Traoré had a normal life before joining the army. He moved to Ouagadougou, the capital, to study rocks at Joseph Kizerbo University. People say he was shy and quiet, but also very smart. As the top student in his class, he chose to join the army instead of finishing his university studies. In 2009, Ibrahim Traoré joined the Georges Ramono Military Academy in Pau. This school is seen as less important than the Kadiogo Military Academy, where Thomas Sankara and former President Damiba went. After he graduated in 2012, Ibrahim Traoré joined the Artillery Regiment of Kaya. 2 years later, he was promoted to lieutenant. Ibrahim Traoré quickly impressed his bosses and was sent for training on anti-aircraft weapons in Morocco. After working in less important jobs in Burkina Faso's military, Traoré's big chance came in 2014 when he was sent to Mali as a soldier under the United Nations peacekeeping mission, MINUSMA. In Mali, Traoré learned how to fight against rebels and groups from different tribes. People say Traoré was brave during a tough attack by fighters in the northern Timbuktu area in 2018. The next year, he was part of a military operation called Operation Otapunu in Burkina Faso's troubled east. Even though it was called a big success, this operation only made the rebels leave the area for a short time, and then they attacked in other parts of the country. He also worked in a group in Marcoy, in the northern Sahel area, at the place where Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger meet, fighting against rebel groups. People who knew Traoré then said he was a leader, strong, brave, and close to his soldiers. Ibrahim Traoré was promoted to captain in 2020. Around the same time, he was one of the young and unhappy officers who saw that their bosses couldn't stop the rebels in the field. Traoré and his fellow officers were in a tough spot. One person told a story about 2020 when the town of Basilogo in central Burkina Faso was about to be taken by rebels. The road into Basilogo was thought to have bombs, so Traoré led his men through the countryside, arriving just in time to save the town. At this point, it's important to say that the rebel fighting has caused big problems for the people of Burkina Faso. Rebel groups are causing chaos in Burkina Faso's northern areas, controlling large parts of land, especially in the countryside far from the government. People think the government controls just over 50% of the country, and it might be less. Attacks by the group for the support of Islam and Muslims, also known as Jihadist, which is connected to Al-Qaeda, and by the Islamic State Sahel, have been increasing in the area where Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger meet. Jihadist, especially, which is based in Mali and active in much of West Africa, uses the lack of jobs, as well as problems between tribes and social groups, to get new members and grow its power in the area. Jihadist gets money by getting ransom for people they capture, taxing local people, smuggling weapons, and taking money from people who smuggle people and drugs. In Burkina Faso, the attacks by rebel groups include armed attacks, kidnappings, stealing cars, bombs, rocket attacks, and ambushes. The areas most affected in Burkina Faso are the Sahel, Nord, Centre-Nord, and EST. By late 2021, many parts of Burkina Faso had a humanitarian crisis, and a quarter of the people didn't have enough food. By mid-September 2022, more than 3,000 people had been killed, which is a third more than in all of 2021. In total, about 2 million people have been forced to leave their homes in Burkina Faso. In January 2022, a military takeover led by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba removed the government of President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore. President Kabore was elected in 2015 and re-elected in 2020, replacing President Michel Kafando, who led a temporary government after the 2014 People's Revolution that removed Blaise Compaoré. Blaise Compaoré ruled Burkina Faso for 27 years after taking power in the 1987 bloody takeover that killed revolutionary leader Thomas Sankara. When Damiba took power, He said President Traoré couldn't stop the rebel fighting troubling Burkina Faso. Soon after taking power, Damiba created the Patriotic Movement for Safeguard and Restoration, the MPSR, and promised to take back the country by fighting the rebels and helping the 2 million people who had to leave their homes. Captain Ibrahim Traoré became a member of the MPSR, as Damiba's group chose to call itself I in March 2022. Damiba promoted Ibrahim Traoré to become the head of artillery in the Kaya regiment in the center of the country. But that move, ironically, would cause Damiba's own downfall. Sadly, during Damiba's short time in power, attacks by rebel groups increased in Burkina Faso, as they took land in rural areas and surrounded cities. Under this new government, many soldiers saw little improvement, and even though they were stationed in far-off areas, they often didn't get paid on time. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's group became a place of unhappiness, and Traoré himself, asked by his colleagues to speak for them, made several trips to Ouagadougou to ask President Damiba for help. As the months went by, unhappiness with President Damiba continued to grow among the soldiers. The soldiers still faced the same problems and were losing many of their people. This is why Lieutenant Colonel Damiba and his group of fancy officers, sitting in their comfortable offices in the capital, were accused of not understanding what was really happening. Disappointment with Damiba's government turned into anger, which seems to have made the soldiers decide to take power. Like the January takeover, the reason was an attack on September 26, 2022, by rebel fighters on a 150-truck convoy carrying food to Djibouti, one of the main cities in the Sahel area. This city of 60,000 people had been under attack by terror groups for about 18 months. This attack on the convoy, which was claimed by a group connected to Al-Qaeda, killed 37 people, including 27 soldiers. In the army, people were very upset, especially the younger soldiers. This loss was blamed on Damiba. A week earlier, he had taken a big group to the United Nations summit in New York. President Damiba said his government was making progress in fighting terrorism, and he asked for help from other countries. The trip to the United Nations summit was seen in Burkina Faso as a waste of money and not caring about the bad security situation in the country. In the days that followed, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, speaking for many angry soldiers, went to Ouagadougou to talk to President Damiba. He asked to meet with the president but never got an answer. Feeling ignored, Traoré and other officers of his age decided to act. At dawn on September 30th, gunshots were heard in Ouagadougou. The people taking over had started that plan. Around 8 p.m. local time, a soldier in uniform, bulletproof vest, and red hat, surrounded by men with hoods and helmets, appeared on the Burkina Broadcasting Corporation, (BRB). Sadly, our shared goals were betrayed by our leader, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandogo Damiba, whom we trusted. Indeed, the worsening security situation, which was why we acted, has been pushed aside for bad political actions. Instead of freeing the areas taken over, the man announced that Captain Ibrahim Traoré was taking over as head of the Patriotic Movement for Safeguard and Restoration, removing Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandogo Damiba. Knowing our responsibility, the Patriotic Movement for Safeguard and Restoration tells all fighting forces to focus on security and the restoration of our land. We promise the world that Burkina Faso will continue to follow its promises, including human rights. Traoré's group also made it clear that they wanted to find more international partners to help fight the rebels. As this takeover happened over the next 48 hours, Captain Ibrahim Traoré and his men showed they weren't afraid of more problems. On October 1st, when their takeover seemed to be failing, Traoré and his officers went on TV to say that Damiba had gone to the French military base of Camboinsen to plan a fight against them. In Burkina Faso, where many people don't like France, this news was shocking. Even though the French government said it wasn't true, thousands of people went to the streets of Ouagadougou and Bobo-Dioulasso to attack the French embassy and the French Institute. So, what started as a takeover by soldiers turned into a people's uprising to save the country from a plan supposedly supported by France. During the night, several army groups, including the Air Force and some special forces, joined Captain Ibrahim Traoré's side. The next morning, Damiba had to quit. At just 34 years old, Captain Ibrahim Traoré became the temporary president of Burkina Faso. Wearing a red hat, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's new leader and self-appointed president, gathered thousands of people. Taking power in the capital, Ouagadougou, was easier than fighting armed groups in the north of the country, where soldiers are losing battles against groups connected to ISIL and Al-Qaeda. Ever since Ibrahim Traoré took power, things have been tense with France, which ruled Burkina Faso from 1896 to 1960. After the takeover, hundreds of people protested in Ouagadougou, asking for the end of the French military presence, which is disliked in West and Sahelian Africa. In January 2023, Burkina Faso told France to remove its troops within a month, ending a military agreement that allowed French troops to fight rebels on its land, saying Burkina Faso wanted to defend itself. The next month, in February 2023, France and Burkina Faso officially ended French military operations in the West African nation after a flag-lowering ceremony at the French Special Forces camp. All of this made people think that Burkina Faso would make stronger security ties with Russia, like neighboring Mali, where Russian Wagner mercenaries were operating. In August 2023, Ibrahim Traoré talked with a Russian group that included discussions about possible military cooperation. This was a follow-up to talks between Traoré and Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Russia-Africa summit that took place in St. Petersburg in July of the same year. While other African presidents wore their fancy suits, Ibrahim Traoré wore military clothes, complete with a red hat and tactical gloves. This has become his usual look. Ibrahim Traoré's speech during the Russia-Africa summit was praised, with some people calling him a new Sankara. Here's part of his speech. The problem is, seeing African leaders do nothing for people who are suffering, singing the same song as the imperialists who call us militias. As a result, they call us people who don't respect human rights. We African leaders must stop acting like puppets who dance when the imperialists pull our strings. In another speech, Traoré criticized African presidents who were happy to get free things. Part of the speech continues. And here, yesterday, President Vladimir Putin announced that free grain would be sent to Africa. This is good, and we say thank you. However, this is also a message to our African leaders. At the next meeting, we must not come here without making sure our people have enough food. We must learn from those who have succeeded in doing this. Don't hesitate to subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a good one.